everyone should see things for what they clearly are. There's some truth that isn't up for debate. However, there was one really interesting or kind of refreshing development. I would even call it delicious, where people who even supported regime change in Syria, some of the most devious propagandists, were united with people who think more like us, that Clarissa Ward is one of the biggest frauds in journalism. It is basically a news actor who, for whatever reason, be it a dearth of talent or some other qualities that were lacking, could not make it in Hollywood. And so she chose CNN to be their top, and became their top foreign correspondent and fanatical regime change propagandist. And here she is. I mean, I'm sure almost everyone watching this is familiar with this by now, because it even made international headlines. It was even featured in the Washington Post. But we've known that she was doing this for years and years and years, which is just acting and making stuff up.
After 3 months in a windowless cell, you can finally see the sky.
He's a good actor too.
My God, the light.
Great actor.
God, there is light. My God, there is light.
Okay. Look, she's showing so much empathy.
Stay with me. Stay with me. He repeats again and again.
Why is she speaking English to him when she speaks Arabic?
For 3 months, I didn't do anything about my family. I didn't hear anything about my children. The fighter hands him something to eat. He barely lifted to his mouth.
Good to see him getting a bite.
But his body can't handle it. His captors fled during the fall of Damascus.
He barfed.
Leaving him with
I mean,
no
he looks
food
like he's
or
been
water.
eating a little bit.
It was at
He
least
looks
4
bad,
days
but he
ago.
looks like he's been eating.
I'm shaking. My face is shaking, he says. The rebel tells him there's no more army, no more prisons, no more checkpoints. Are you serious? He says. Surya Harra. Syria is free, he tells him.
Well, it turns out that, as the community note indicates, Verify SY, which looks like one of these National Endowment for Democracy publications that is very pro-regime change in Syria, a fact-checking group, now says that this man is Air Force Intelligence First Lieutenant Salama Mohammed Salama, who was jailed for extortion and theft in homes, basically was manning checkpoints. He's like celebrating the end of checkpoints that were his duty. And he was arrested because of disputes with his colleagues about profit sharing. So I guess that's why a lot of people on the other side of us actually were outraged by this segment as well. But I mean, anyone could see, like my father-in-law wrote me and Anya and sent us this segment without knowing that we had already been ruthlessly mocking it and debunking it on social media. He's not on social media, and said, "What is this?" I mean, he filmed it off the TV because even after it was debunked, CNN continued to air it and broadcast it. And he said, this is like BS. What is this? So anyone could see through this. Clarissa Ward should have known, but that's what she's been doing throughout her career.
Well, I think she did know. She just is so used to getting away with lying that it just didn't matter. And I mean, the scene where she comes into the cell and all of a sudden she discovers the guy under his blanket. And this is days after the prison has been emptied. And she expected everybody to believe this. And she was encouraged by her colleagues who were all sharing the stories that this was like, worthy of a Pulitzer. And that's probably what she was thinking the whole time, that like, this is it. This is Pulitzer material right here. And I'm going to speak English for the camera just so that when they show this at the award show, it's going to be that much more dramatic. And let's see how she explained this to when everyone was calling it out. Then she went on CNN a few days later and sort of acknowledged that the guy wasn't who he said he was, but she sort of ended at that. She didn't take any accountability for her own duplicity here.
So what do we know about this man now?
Well, Jake, obviously from the minute we witnessed this, trying to dig up more information on this prisoner, we weren't able to find anything with the name he gave us, Adel Khurbal. But in the days after our report aired, CNN started talking to people in the city of Homs who told us that his real name is, in fact, Salama Mohammed Salama. He is reportedly a lieutenant in the Air Force Intelligence Directorate. He is also known.
So what she's admitting there is that they aired this story without verifying any of the information.
Yep.
She's acknowledging that she didn't do journalism. She just got this moment, thought this would win her a Pulitzer, and then put it on the air without verifying any of the details. And now, after she was mocked for it, after no one believed it, then she went out and did what she should have done to begin with, which is journalism, and realized that he's not who he said he was. But she's not apologizing here. She's just presenting this as normal, that they went and aired something without verifying any of its contents. And also the fact that everybody mocked her for it, which forced her to do the journalism that she didn't do to begin with, and which she never would have done had she not been mocked for
it. and they're just like referring to it as a follow-up. They're not mentioning the controversy. They're not informing the viewers about what prompted her follow-up interview with Jake Tapper. They're just allowing her to cover it up. And she has not acknowledged any fault here at all. No. There's been no accountability. Look at her tweet. We can confirm the real identity of the man from our story last Wednesday as Salama Mohammed Salama. But readers have to add the context here that she refuses to provide, which that it debunks the entire purpose of her segment, which she described as the most extraordinary moment of her journalistic career. The most extraordinary moment of her whole career turns out to be a giant fraud. And so, now,
Well, and then let's compare that to how she reacted when you were in Syria last.
This is her tweet responding to or freaking out about me being in Syria.
Yeah.
Started to read a certain journalist's thread from inside Damascus this AM, then found myself getting palpitations, which progressed into spasms of rage. She was literally shaking, starting with palpitations and literally shaking. How can anyone be so blindly credulous? Are narcotics involved? It is such a disgrace. So I wasn't showing any staged scenes at all. I was just taking pictures of what was going on. I met some people who were tortured and had family members killed by the so-called rebels. They were real, confirmed. One of them was on crutches because he was badly wounded, or he had been wounded in a bombing. And she freaked out on me and was literally shaking. And she accused me of being a drug addict. Like, I'd been popping Captagon and just made a bunch of stuff up. And then as soon as she gets to Damascus, she just descends into one of the biggest journalistic scandals, at least the ones that have been exposed this year. It's kind of amazing. And no accountability for her at all.
She's previously admitted that she openly supported U.S. military intervention to cause regime change, that she wasn't just satisfied with the U.S. spending billions of dollars via the CIA to arm the insurgency, that she wanted direct U.S. military intervention. And she complained that the U.S. said that Assad must go, but did not ultimately directly military intervene to make that happen. She complained about this in an interview with CBS a few years ago. And she was so angry about it that she sent angry notes to Ben Rhodes, who was a former screenwriter who was working in the Obama administration. And she said that she would send Ben Rhodes angry voice notes complaining that the U.S. had not militarily intervened in Syria. That's how committed she is to regime change. And that's why she's totally fine putting out constant regime change propaganda.
Yeah, she's testified at the UN as a guest of the American delegation alongside US-backed Syrian propagandists for regime change. I mean, she was very open about that. And it wouldn't have been her first time engaging in a kind of staged performance on CNN. Here's Brian Stelter proudly promoting one of her most ridiculous moments where she pretends to be under attack by Hamas. And
on the ground right now, Clarissa, tell us what's happening.
Hi, John. So forgive me, I have a slightly unelegant position, but we have just had a
inelegant,
massive barrage of rockets coming in here, not too far from us. So we have had to take shelter here by the roadside. We're just about 5 minutes away. Gaza is in that direction. We can hear now a lot of jets in the sky. We could also hear the Iron Dome intercepting a number of those rockets as
Gotta
they
plug the Iron Dome.
Whizzing overhead and making impact in that direction, not too far from here. We came to this location because this was ground zero for this entire operation of carnage. Hamas militants.
There's no reason for her to be on the ground anymore. It's not, there's no rockets falling anywhere near her. And being on the ground isn't going to protect her if shrapnel's falling from the Iron Dome. You know, the panting and the palpitations. She's having palpitations, which are progressing into spasms of rage. All right, you can get up again. I don't know if she has time to sniff a backpack here.
Sorry, just 1 second, guys. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so now
Everybody else is just parked there. They're just doing their thing.
This is where those militants first came, opening up fire on all these vehicles. There's a baby carriage down there, turned over on its side. You can see over there, Clayton.
She's saying they killed babies.
In the distance there, some kind of strike, looks like in Gaza as well. Return fire. Or is that the smoke from the rocket launches? Forgive me. It's a little difficult after being crouched in a ditch to know exactly what's been going on.
Yeah.
And then she's actually most known, I think, probably around the world, not for any of her journalism, but for the time when she got confronted at the Rafah border crossing on the Egyptian side by Rahma Zain, who's an Egyptian activist who just like called out Clarissa Ward for putting out propaganda to whitewash the genocide of Palestinians. And that clip went viral because Clarissa Ward was, being called out, and also because everyone just knew it was true. And it was like refreshing for people to see finally a propagandist from a U.S. media outlet like CNN being confronted directly.
Yeah, Clarissa Ward had, attempted to push the Israeli version of the bombing of the Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital, that it was a misfired Palestinian rocket. And here she is being confronted in Rafah.
We stand with the Palestinians and we stand with Arabs. And they try and change the narrative because you own the narrative, see? This is our problem. You own the narrative. You own the United Nations. You own Hollywood. You own all these mouthpieces. Where are our voices? Our voices need to be heard as well. We've been watching your channel. And instead of mourning our dead, instead of mourning these Palestinian children, we've been having to deal with more dehumanization of Arabs. We ask you to condemn. Where are your condemnation? Where's your channel covering this? Cover this. Say the truth. We understand you're an employee. You're just a company. You're just a mouthpiece. Come talk to me like a human being. Come talk to me like a human being.
You're just a mouthpiece. She calls her a mouthpiece correctly. And, this was before she gets to the one place where, all these fraud Western corporate journalists can show sympathy for Arabs is in Damascus. It's like the only place, because they support regime change. They support the recolonization of Syria, and they get to pretend that they care about Syrian victims of some evil regime. But when it comes to Palestine, Clarissa Ward was both sidesing everything and pushing Israeli propaganda left and right. And you just see that across the board. But the other dimension of it is just how CNN it's not news. It's failing. It's losing its viewership, especially after the defeat of Kamala Harris. And they're emphasizing infotainment.
Yes. And if we're, since this is an end of the year show, if we can look back on this horrible year, that's one of the rare rays of light, that people across the spectrum recognize that CNN, MSNBC, all these corporate outlets are just straight up propaganda, and they're tuning them out. They don't care. They don't have anywhere near the influence that they used to. And that sign that they've lost control of shaping the narrative, that is there's despite all the horrors that we're seeing in the world. That is a genuinely positive development. That's one thing we can look back on from this year and say, that's a good thing that happened, you know. And how are they going to come back from it? They won't. They can't, because they still employ people like this. And they're not set up to tell people the truth. And everyone knows that.